Let's talk about the 16 most overpowered thinkers of all time, from their origin stories to the ideas that still shape how we live and see the world today. Buddha, born Siddhartha Gautama in 563 BC, didn't start as a sage. Born in Lumbini, modern-day Nepal, he grew up as a sheltered prince, raised in luxury, kept away from pain. That illusion shattered the day he stepped beyond the palace walls and saw sickness, aging, and death. Haunted, he abandoned his wealth in search of an answer. After years of wandering and meditation, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and vowed not to rise until he understood suffering completely. What he discovered became known as the Four Noble Truths. Life is marked by suffering. Craving fuels it. Freedom comes from ending craving. And the path forward is a disciplined way of living. These insights grew into Buddhism, a tradition that is both a philosophy of life and a global religion. As he put it, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. 2.5 millennia later, millions still walk that path. Today, Buddhism is most widely practiced in countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Japan, and China, with over 500 million followers worldwide. A legacy of inner freedom that outlasted empires. Buddha wasn't grinding for gold or XP. He rewrote the rules of the whole game. Confucius, born in 551 BC in the Lu state, modern-day China, didn't rise from wealth or power. He started as a teacher, but in a time of constant war, rulers had little interest in virtue. So, Confucius wandered from court to court, offering advice to kings, and getting ignored again and again. But failure wasn't game over to him. It was just a restart. He once said, "Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in getting up every time we do." And Confucius embodied this philosophy. His persistence paid off. Students began gathering around him. And from those students grew Confucianism, built on Ren, humanness, Li, ritual and respect, and filial piety, loyalty to family and ancestors. 2,500 years later, his ideas still guide families, schools, and governments across East Asia, from China and Korea to Vietnam and Japan. A teacher rejected in life, who became the blueprint for how society should live together. Socrates, born in 470 BC in Athens, never wrote a single book. Everything we know about him comes from his students, like Plato. Socrates made a career out of questioning, asking leaders, poets, and citizens to explain what they really believed. When their answers fell apart, he exposed the contradictions. Think of him as the original playtester, breaking people's arguments by stress testing the code. That constant needling earned Socrates a nickname, the gadfly of Athens, and his philosophy was simple. True wisdom begins in admitting you know nothing. But Athens saw him as dangerous. Socrates was then put on trial for corrupting the youth and refusing to worship the city's gods. His defense? The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates was sentenced to death and calmly drank a cup of poison hemlock. The toxin didn't bring fire or screaming. It crept upward as paralysis, slowly shutting down his body while his mind stayed sharp until the end. Socrates died a martyr, lighting the path for Western philosophy. From Plato to Aristotle, and set the mold for every truth seeker who dares to challenge power. Plato. Plato, born in 427 BC in Athens, was a student of Socrates, we talked about that, and later became the teacher of Aristotle. Plato believed the world we see is only a shadow of a higher reality. He explained it through his famous story, the allegory of the cave. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave from birth. All they can see are shadows on the wall, cast by objects around them. To these prisoners, the shadows are reality. But one prisoner breaks free. He stumbles out of the cave, blinded by the sun at first, then amazed to see the real world, the trees, the stars, and the people as they truly are. When he returns to the cave to tell the others, they mock him and continue to cling to their shadows. For Plato, we are those prisoners. The senses show us only shadows, while the eternal forms, perfect justice, beauty, and truth, exist outside the cave. Plato turned these ideas into a school, founding the Academy in Athens, the first university in the West. As Plato warned, the price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Plato's philosophy still shapes politics, science, and education. Think of Plato as the first map designer, drawing the path from shadows to truth. Aristotle. Aristotle, born in 384 BC in Stagira, Greece, was a student of Plato and later the tutor of Alexander the Great. But Aristotle wasn't just passing down wisdom, he was building entire systems of knowledge. Aristotle studied everything he could touch or see: planets, animals, politics, logic, ethics, and he organized it all like the ultimate skill tree of human knowledge. Where Plato pointed to higher realities, Aristotle insisted truth comes from observing the world directly. His influence was so vast that for over 1,000 years, medieval scholars didn't even call him by name. They simply said, "the philosopher." One of Aristotle's most timeless pieces of advice? Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle's legacy shaped science, philosophy, and education for 1,500 years. From Alexander's conquests to the classrooms of Europe, Aristotle set the framework for how the West would think. Avicenna. Avicenna, also known as Ibn Sina, was born in 980 AD near Bukhara in modern-day Uzbekistan. A child prodigy, Avicenna mastered philosophy and medicine before he turned 18. By his 20s, Avicenna was serving kings as a physician by day and writing by night. Over his lifetime, Avicenna produced more than 400 works on everything from logic and astronomy to psychology and metaphysics. Avicenna's most famous book was The Canon of Medicine, a medical encyclopedia so influential it was used as a standard textbook in Europe and in the Middle East for nearly 600 years. But Avicenna wasn't only a doctor. He blended Aristotle's philosophy with Islamic thought, arguing that the soul was immortal and that reason could lead us closer to truth. As Avicenna put it, the knowledge of anything is not acquired unless it is known by its causes. If Aristotle built the skill tree, Avicenna patched it, adding logic, medicine, and a whole new expansion. Philosopher, physician, and prodigy, Avicenna earned the title, the Prince of Physicians. And his legacy bridged worlds, keeping ancient Greek wisdom alive and carrying it to the heart of medieval Europe. Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, born in 1225 in Rocca Secca, Italy, was a Dominican friar and one of the greatest thinkers of the Middle Ages. As a student, Aquinas was so quiet that classmates mocked him as the dumb ox, but a teacher warned them, saying, "This ox will one day bellow so loud, the whole world will hear him." And they were right. Aquinas refused Aristotle's philosophy with Christian theology, creating a system known as scholasticism. He argued that reason and faith weren't enemies. They were two wings on the same bird, lifting the mind closer to truth. As Aquinas put it, "The one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. The one without faith, no explanation is possible." His masterpiece, the Summa Theologica, became the cornerstone of Catholic thought and shaped Western philosophy for centuries. Think of Aquinas as the ultimate bridge builder, patching faith and reason into the same game system. René Descartes. René Descartes, born in 1596 in Le Haye-en-Touraine, France, was a philosopher, mathematician, and scientist. Descartes made his mark by doubting everything. He questioned the senses, the body, even the existence of the world itself. But in that sea of doubt, he found one certainty. Cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Descartes didn't stop there. He built an entire system of knowledge on reason, earning the title, the father of modern philosophy. In mathematics, he created Cartesian geometry, the foundation of analytic geometry still used in classrooms today. Descartes' influence reached across science, logic, and the Enlightenment. Think of Descartes as the ultimate reset button, erasing the save file of knowledge until only one truth remained to build on. Anton Wilhelm Amo. Anton Wilhelm Amo was born around 1703 in present-day Ghana. As a child, Amo was taken to Europe during the era of the slave trade. But instead of being forced into labor, he was placed in a German court and given an education that would change his life. Against all odds, Amo rose to become the first African-born philosopher to teach at a European university. He earned degrees in philosophy and law, and taught at Halle and Jena. Amo's writings defended human dignity and freedom, while critiquing slavery and racial prejudice centuries ahead of his time. As Amo put it, the mind is immaterial and cannot be acted upon by physical things. What he meant was simple. The body might feel pain or pleasure, but the mind itself remains free. The mind itself cannot be chained, beaten, or enslaved. A pioneer, a defender of rights, a philosopher of the mind. Amo was the first unexpected character unlock in a game that wasn't built for him. David Hume. Born in 1711 in Edinburgh, Scotland, he was one of the sharpest skeptics of the Enlightenment. Hume argued that all knowledge comes from experience, not pure reason. We trust what we see and feel, but reason alone can't prove much of anything. As Hume put it, a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. That's why Hume doubted religion and miracles. If you can't verify it with experience, you can't claim it as truth. Hume also uncovered the problem of induction, our habit of assuming the future will resemble the past. The sun rose yesterday, but that doesn't prove it will rise tomorrow. When Hume first published his Treatise of Human Nature, it flopped, but his later essays won him recognition, and his ideas shook philosophy to its core. Think of Hume as the debugger. He wouldn't trust the code until he could see it run in real time. Hume's relentless skepticism later forced Kant to rethink philosophy itself, laying the groundwork for how science and philosophy still test evidence today. Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, was born in 1724 in Königsberg, Prussia, modern-day Kaliningrad, Russia. Kant lived such a strict routine that his neighbors set their clocks by his daily walk. But beneath that predictability was one of philosophy's most radical minds. Kant argued that knowledge begins with experience, but our minds actively shape it, filtering the world through built-in categories of space, time, and causality. In ethics, Kant created the categorical imperative, a universal moral law, or as he put it, act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Kant asked three questions that still guide philosophy. What can we know? What should we know? And what may we hope? His influence was so vast that every philosopher after him had to respond to Kant in some way. Think of Kant as the ultimate rulebook designer, laying down the laws of knowledge and morality that every player still has to follow. And Kant's legacy continues, still shaping modern debates in science, ethics, and politics today. Karl Marx. Karl Marx was born in 1818 in Trier, Germany. Marx studied law and philosophy, but spent much of his life in exile, writing with Friedrich Engels. Marx believed history was driven by class struggle, the constant battle between the rich and the poor. He argued that capitalism exploits workers, and that the only way forward was for them to unite and change the system. As Marx declared, "Workers of the world, unite! We have nothing to lose but our chains." His most famous works, the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, called for revolution and reshaped politics across the globe. Think of Marx as the systems designer, rewriting the rules so the players at the bottom could finally compete with those at the top. Love him or hate him, Marx's ideas inspired revolutions and political movements from Russia to China to Cuba, leaving a legacy still argued over 2 centuries later. Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Rocken, Germany. Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." He didn't mean it literally, but as a warning that modern society had lost its foundation of meaning. Nietzsche challenged people to face that void without despair and to create their own values. At the center of his philosophy was the will to power, the drive to grow, struggle, and overcome, and his vision of the Übermensch, the overman, was a call for humanity to rise beyond mediocrity. As Nietzsche put it, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But Nietzsche's life ended in tragedy. After a mental collapse in 1889, he spent his last years in silence. Think of Nietzsche as the hard mode on Locke, stripping away old rules and forcing players to create meaning themselves. Nietzsche's ideas reshaped philosophy, literature, and psychology, and his challenge still echoes today: to find strength in a world without certainties. William James. William James was born in 1842 in New York City. Originally trained as a doctor, James turned to psychology and philosophy and became the first to teach psychology at Harvard. James believed that truth wasn't about abstract theories, but about what actually works in practice. He called this idea pragmatism. As James put it, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." For James, beliefs mattered only if they helped us live better. That made him not just a philosopher, but a psychologist of everyday life. James gave America its own school of philosophy, practical, experimental, and deeply human. Think of James as the ultimate build optimizer, testing which strategies really work in the game of life. And his pragmatism still shapes psychology, education, and philosophy today, a legacy that continues to guide how we define truth itself. Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre was born in Paris in 1905. Sartre believed that life came with no present meaning. His core idea was existentialism. Existence precedes essence. We aren't born with a fixed purpose. We create meaning through our choices. For Sartre, his freedom was exhilarating and terrifying. As he put it, man is condemned to be free. He warned against bad faith, pretending we have no choice just to escape responsibility. But Sartre wasn't just a philosopher. He was a novelist, a playwright, and a political activist. He spoke out against colonialism and even refused the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964, saying he didn't want to be turned into an institution. Think of Sartre as the open-world designer, dropping you into life without a quest log and telling you the story is yours to make. Sartre's existentialism spread far beyond academia, shaping literature, politics, and popular culture, a legacy of freedom and responsibility that still challenges us today. Leopoldo Sea. Leopoldo Sea was born in Mexico City in 1912. Sea believed that Latin America had spent too long as a reflection of Europe. He argued it was time for the continent to build its own philosophy rooted in its history, its culture, and its struggles. As Sea put it, Latin America must stop being the echo of others and find its own voice. Sea critiqued Eurocentrism, challenging the colonial mindset that treated Europe as the center of thought, and he pushed Latin American philosophy onto the global stage, leading institutions and movements that demanded recognition. Think of Sea as the new server host, refusing to play on Europe's server and building a Latin American one instead. Sea's work became a cornerstone of post-colonial philosophy, giving Latin America its own seat at the table and a voice that still echoes worldwide. Runner-ups. Narrowing the greatest philosophers in history down to 16 wasn't easy. And of course, some legendary names didn't make the main roster. These thinkers still reshaped philosophy in their own right, but were left as runner-ups either because their role overlaps with philosophers we've already covered, or because we were trying to keep the spotlight balanced across the globe. So before we wrap it up, let's give a quick nod to the runner-ups. John Locke, the father of liberalism. Locke's ideas of natural right and the social contract laid the foundation for modern democracy and directly influenced the U.S. Constitution. But Locke was left as a runner-up, since our 16 already highlight political thinkers like Marx and Kant, and we wanted space for more global voices. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the restless voice of freedom. He declared that man is born free, but everywhere in chains, arguing for a new social contract that would inspire revolutions across Europe. Rousseau didn't make the cut because his themes overlap with Marx, while others in the 16 brought more unique schools of thought. Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism. Kierkegaard wrestled with faith, despair, and the individual's leap into belief, laying the groundwork for thinkers like Sartre and Nietzsche. But Kierkegaard was left off, since existentialism is already represented in the 16 by Sartre, Nietzsche, and even echoes of James. Michel Foucault, the critic of power. He exposed how institutions like prisons, schools, and hospitals shape our lives and knowledge, making him one of the most influential voices of the 20th century. We left Foucault as a runner-up because his postmodern lens is powerful, but the 16 focus more on thinkers who built enduring systems and schools. Zhuangzi, the Taoist sage of ancient China. His playful parables, like the famous butterfly dream, questioned reality itself and offered a vision of freedom through harmony with the Tao. Zhuangzi didn't make the final roster because Taoism is already touched on by Buddha and Confucius in the 16, and we prioritized geographic breadth elsewhere. All of these great thinkers from history are important, influential, unforgettable, but just outside our final 16. And that's the roster. 16 of the greatest philosophers the world has ever seen, from ancient sages to modern rebels, from Asia to Africa, Europe to the Americas. Each one played the game of ideas in their own way. Some rewrote the rules, some built the skill trees, and others tore the system down entirely. But now, it's your turn. Who do you think should have made the list? Was it one of our runner-ups? Locke, Rousseau, Kierkegaard, Foucault, Zhuangzi, or someone else entirely? Drop your pick in the comments and tell us who you would add to the roster. Because philosophy isn't just about the past, it's still the game we're all playing today.